the water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Hello, everybody. Today we have an amazing founder from Chicago, Laura Epstein from Pulse Charter Connect. She has an amazing story. I think there's something about the Midwest that brings like another level of perseverance that people on the West Coast don't have.
Finally get some respect.
People just expect millions of dollars to fall out of the sky.
It's true. At this podcast, we talk so much about how great Romania is, but never. So this is our time.
Swing it back to the U.S. America first. Well, look, guys, before we get going, thanks for coming on, Laura. We have our icebreaker, which today is what's your favorite sport, both to play and to watch. Oh, you want to go, Taylor?
Yeah. So I love to play basketball.
What?
I know it's very surprising to you because you and I have only played it once, but and I just kind of shot around. I used to play basketball until 8th grade.
I asked you to play every time when you were living near me, and you were never like, let's play.
That's true. But playing in New York's a little different. Yeah. So playing basketball, but I like to watch basketball too. But football is so much fun to watch. I love football. I could watch football all day. I could, there were days when, I could watch it 8 hours. I just love football. So that's me. What about you, Flavio?
Wow, that's incredible. I never would have guessed either of those. And I've known you a long time. I thought you loved to watch basketball.
I do love to watch basketball.
So I played tennis for like 20 years and then took like a 10-year break. But now I'm back in. I really think I enjoy playing it. But
you're back?
I'm back. And
Laura, he was nationally ranked or internationally ranked.
I know. That's awesome. My mom's a huge tennis fan too. So I love watching tennis.
It's how Johnny introduced us to Laura, and everybody knows Johnny from the pod we had with him. And the first thing he tells people about me is like my tennis ranking, which is like not how anybody introduces me anywhere else. But I never enjoyed watching tennis. Honestly, I think while I love playing it, I think it's like the most boring sport to watch. Like my parents always be like, "Hey, you need to watch more tennis." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is so boring." But I do love watching basketball. So that's like my YouTube. Like
your boy, Steph Curry.
Everybody's got a rabbit hole that goes in on YouTube, right? And that's mine. So what about you, Laura?
Cool. I mean, I do love watching tennis and some college basketball, but I was going to throw in like Summer Olympics. I love all of those sports, and that's really just like the best time to watch everything back to back to back.
That's true.
I still have like a Peacock subscription probably just because. But listen, I thought you played water polo. Is that true?
I did. So I love watching it. And then now I just swim because it's not like you could just pick up water polo games quite regularly.
So what's your favorite to play?
It was water polo back in the day. Now I'll just say swimming because it's a great spot to clear your mind and just be active.
Do people play water polo like in park
leagues?
Yeah, are there leagues or?
They do. I wasn't good enough. So I kind of let my career die when I graduated. But I have friends that still play a bit in like masters leagues.
Wow.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming on. And you are so interesting. You have a background in aerospace engineering and you're a pilot, right? You can fly an airplane.
Yeah. So did that both when I was in college, went to school in Virginia, and then worked for the Federal Aviation Administration after. So really I've just been quite passionate about aviation for all of my career.
That's amazing. So you, while you were in college, got your pilot license?
I finished it when I graduated, but I started during then.
So many hours. I know so many people that tried to get their pilot license, but didn't, right? It's quite a commitment. Especially in college, when you're like hung over on the weekend, you're like, you were going to get your pilot's license.
Yeah, that's why it took me a little bit longer, I'd say. Also, just like it's hard to fly in the spring when there's all the thunderstorms. So I finished it out in DC, but it started when I was in school.
And so you started Pulse Charter Connect. You're the founder. You don't have a co-founder, right?
Correct.
And so what made you start this? It's organ transport logistics, but maybe you can share kind of like how did this come about?
Sure. So Pulse Charter Connect, we're a healthcare logistics platform. So we transport organs and surgeons for transplant, quite often an overlooked space, but I was able to learn much more about it firsthand. So I moved out to Chicago to go to business school, got my MBA at Booth, and was working with a private jet company on the side that was flying around organs. And that was really where I saw how impactful this mission is. And if we could add some more efficiencies, the more lives that we'd be able to save would truly be incredible. And that's really what drew me to mixing my passion for aviation with some social good and starting Pulse Charter Connect.
Well, and how did I tried a company without a co-founder, by the way, before. Amplicare, and it was so hard that as soon as I got into some obstacles, I just got so sad and folded. I mean, I guess it was still around. Actually, I think the domain's still around. I keep renewing it, but it's just too hard. So I'm wondering how you chose that path.
Yeah, I think you just truly have to surround yourself with a community that's supportive and then find the right stakeholders in the business that act as if they're co-founders. So our advisors have been incredible, putting hours above and beyond what I ever would have expected. And I get to orchestrate a lot of it, but it truly is a team effort. And it's interesting claiming to be a solo founder when like that is inherently the truth, but it doesn't feel like it because of the relationships that I've made with the surrounding community.
I used to have a client in my last business that was an eye bank, and they would fly corneas between in the state of Kentucky. They'd fly them from mostly like from cities where I guess accidents happen, people would die, and they take the cornea and then fly them to rural parts of Kentucky. And these flights are very expensive, and they're going to kind of poor areas where there's not a lot of money. And so they would have to they were funded partially by, I think, the government. I think they would get grants or something, but they would also kind of try to raise money. How did the economics of kind of organ transplant, like how do the economics work? Like, how do you get paid? How does the like money kind of happen? Because I assume it's all very quick, like it has to happen very quickly.
Yes, I'd share that it's not always like what's shown in the media of a person in an accident and then immediately everybody jumps into position. A lot of the cases are actually people on life support that the family chooses to withdraw and actually give the gift of donation. So there's a little bit more time. But in terms of the economics, it's quite different than that cornea story. It's not necessarily going to rural areas because the transplant centers are usually in cosmopolitan areas, but the entire transplant surgery is reimbursed by CMS.
What about if you're, go ahead.
Like your part, like you're kind of bundled in with that, the flight itself. Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
And so someone told me that a flight hour is like $5,000. Is that true? Is that like roughly?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. They're using an assortment of aircraft, so like Learjet, Citations, etc. And those could be anywhere from like $3.5 to $6,000 an hour. We're not doing like the Gulfstreams for these missions that are just crazy.
GD6, taking Adam Newman's private jet and turning it into organ transplant.
If only.
So interesting. Okay, so then you add, and that includes like fuel and a pilot cost.
Yeah, right? It depends how they bill, but
Is that how you
very
bill?
Expensive.
Or they bill you for the costs, and then you bill the hospital, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we're the infrastructure that's underlying in terms of all of the coordination efforts. But at this point, the charter vendors are billing with their own prices. So we're not determining that on their behalf. So we've seen it where it's been a bundled price that they're quoting. We've seen it per hour. And then there's like fuel surcharges. There's actually landing fees that differ per airport. So it's quite interesting just seeing the differences across all of the different companies.
Does it cost anything to keep the aircraft like at the airport? Like is there like parking cost too?
Yeah.
So if they're
there's standby costs. So if you're having the pilots there, if you're parking it full time for the hangar. So there's just really an assortment of different fees. It's interesting when people try to look at how much it would cost for themselves to own an aircraft and how many parts of it are completely overlooked.
Like what would be those parts?
Maintenance. You want more than one pilot if you want to fly more than two pilots if you want to fly whenever you want. So you're having those people on your payroll as well. Aircraft parts. What else? A lot. I don't know. Like we can cut this part out.
They break down a lot. Like I was at a brunch spot that happens to be in an airport hangar, so you get to watch the airplanes. And it was like,
was it in New Jersey?
Where?
I was on Cape Cod. It's a small. Actually, I want to ask you, like, how come you choose a jet versus like a less safe like propeller airplane? Like, wouldn't those be cheaper but slower? But you don't do those, or what? What are your view on that?
Yeah, it really depends on the requirements of the transplant center. So some of them are willing to use turboprops. I don't believe that they're less safe, but I know that there are some preconceptions about them. But in this industry, speed is really of the most important. So for a heart, it can only be outside the body for 4 hours, and they are just moving as fast as they possibly can.
The thing is, like, I know several people that unfortunately passed away in a flight, and it's always been like turboprop. Like, and you're saying they're kind of equally unsafe. I'm just wondering, like, why? Maybe it's just me, but we don't hear about as many people or as many jets, crashing.
I think there's a lot of human factors when it goes into general aviation crashes. So it's interesting in this space too, just recognizing, especially as a pilot, that it is a very important and life-saving mission. but you shouldn't push past what standards are in place to keep you as the crew and the rest of the members of the mission safe. And oftentimes people will go out when it isn't quite what their licensure is supposed to be for.
Does a doctor fly with the heart, for instance? Like so there's two pilot, two pilots, a doctor, the heart, and they all go?
Yeah. So generally what's been done traditionally in this industry is the recipient surgical team will fly out to the donor site to procure the organ. So the surgeon, the two pilots, potentially one or two other people on the aircraft as well, will fly out to the donor site, do the surgery, and then fly back with these 5 people as well as the heart to do the surgery to transplant it into the recipient as well.
Oh, they do both sides.
Yes.
One doctor does both sides. Oh, that's interesting. Well, but why do that instead? I'm sure there's a reason doing that instead of like one doctor doing it on one side, one doctor doing it on the other.
It's really the comfortability of the recipient surgeon. They really know what's best for their patient. So they want to be the one that makes the cuts, is able to analyze the heart and make sure that it's going to be the best fit for their recipient and be able to deny that particular heart for their patient on scene.
They could deny it, and then it rolls to like the next person in the list. Huh.
Oh, and then you fly another person there, so it could be like multiple flights to see the heart or to analyze the heart.
At that point, they likely wouldn't fly there. They would just fly the heart to the recipient, or it would just be somebody nearby. So it could be driven, but there's definitely many, many stakeholders involved for organ donation across.
Is there a
the board.
list? Is there like a prioritized list? Like somebody's at the top of the list and they get top bid? Is that the way it kind of works?
Yes. So that's organized by a federal contractor, the United Network for Organ Sharing, UNOS, and they've run the wait list since, I believe, for the last 40 years. And a lot of that is based on the potential match and then the priority of the patient. So the sicker you are, the higher you move up in the prioritization.
Wow. I remember there's those TV shows about like bribing somebody to like get higher up on the list. That's probably not how it works.
Fortunately, it's not.
Unfortunately. Yeah, that's incredible. And okay, so but just I guess I want to end on the thought about safety. What you're saying is that the safety of propeller versus jet is probably about the same. It's just that the pilots perhaps of propeller planes are a little bit more risky or cowboy style in their approach that they go out when perhaps it is not as advisable.
I think I don't want to speak on behalf of all of these different pilots, but I think it's like a survivorship bias where, you're thinking about all these accidents that happened and there's a lot of correlation between the type of aircraft while not necessarily reflecting on like the weather or other factors that could have been the issue. If you think about, the accident with Kobe back in the day, could have been avoided if they did not fly through that weather. I know that was a helicopter, but it was predominantly pilot error that caused that crash.
It's maybe also a number, right? There's probably way more propeller planes than jet planes flying around privately, no?
I think so, but I'm also like, I don't want to be wrong.
Right. It seems like it's a lot easier. Like my buddy in Romania, software engineer, is like, I want a plane, and he got a fairly cheap propeller, and now he's flying it around. And it just seems like that doesn't happen as often with jets. Like that it feels like it takes a longer time,
you're
more
not
money.
just like picking it up and going.
Right.
As a single pilot.
Like, that doesn't seem safe. He's flying around Cluj. Okay, so back to startup experience. So you did Techstars and the Cedars-Sinai Accelerator. Is that right?
Yes.
I'm wondering what you thought of that these days. We did an accelerator back in the day, but these days I hear a lot of entrepreneurs like, now I want to do accelerators and give up equity. So I'm wondering how that's benefited you.
Yes, I think it's been really interesting, especially doing more than one accelerator. Techstars was very beneficial in the early days, really building out the community of other founders and mentors across the country within the network that can help us grow as a business. The reason after that successful accelerator that we decided to go for another one was that Cedars-Sinai was really focused on healthcare since it's through the health system. So we were able to interact in a way with all of their internal stakeholders in a way that we wouldn't have had as easy of access to move as quickly with them.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I remember when we were in one, it was healthcare focused, but still healthcare is so niche that there really nobody there, even though it was a healthcare accelerator, had experience within our particular niche.
Yes. I mean, we face that quite often just being in this industry. And that was really interesting, especially with Cedars, with being a top transplant center. We were very different than the other companies in our cohort, But we all bonded over being healthcare companies and navigating the US health system. And then also just being able to chat directly with the surgeons, transplant coordinators, finance people, everybody involved within the transplant.
How do you start a business like this? Like this seems like such a niche, but it also requires kind of a combination of skills, right? You have this pilot ability, you have a business sense. Like it requires like such a kind of radius of skills. And then I assume you also have to have connections to be able to land these contracts or to be able to like actually get the customers and generate revenue. How were you able to start it? Like what was kind of the initial contract or the initial conversations like?
Yeah, I was very naive. I just went in. I think that's kind of how all entrepreneurs do it, but I did not have connections directly with the hospitals with the transplant program. So that was really a lot of my focus. I'd say for me, I was still a student when I started the business, and that gave me a lot of access to just interview various stakeholders at hospitals and learn more about the problem. But it truly was an iterative process of learning about the problem, developing something quickly just to show them, get their viewpoint, and then eventually convince them that they should try it out in more of a production level contract within their health system.
And but that's so hard to like really so like people will take meetings with a student, right? You know, sure, you want to learn, but in my experience, it's very difficult to get that next step, which is them to actually sign a contract or give you money. Or so how are you able to like really get the first one or convince someone to kind of take a risk, right? Because you were a new business. So how were you able to convince them to do that? Or what was that like?
I think it's just a lot of persistence. It was interesting because then I would call them back 6 months later and they're like, hey, like how's school? I'm like, oh, I actually graduated and I'm doing this full time and, centering my life around this business. But I think them seeing that I was willing to take the risk there to really help make their jobs easier was something that pushed them to also kind of give us a try in the same vein. But not to say any of this is easy. It's just funny when you're far removed and kind of on to the next problems, you forget how hard the previous obstacles were and now just focused on the next ones.
Who was the first one? Was Cedars-Sinai the first one?
No, we were working with a Midwest health system out of Michigan for quite a while. So they were the first ones to give us a go. We met with their administrators at a conference and really hit it off, and they helped develop the tool and have been great partners with us.
See, I told you, Taylor, conferences is where it's happening. I've been trying to convince Taylor of this. This is great. Do you still go to any conferences, Kiris, in the industry?
I do. I found the industry-specific conferences the most valuable. So like OrganTransplant. I have been to some of the larger like health. I think JP Morgan's this week and I'm missing it. But I really like the smaller targeted conferences.
Yeah, I'm never going to go to JP Morgan as long as it's in San Francisco. but that's just me. So you just sound like what I came across the first time we met is that you're very confident and it just seems very driven also from your story. So I'm just wondering, maybe that's just how you always were, but I'm just curious how you keep that confidence and motivation every day.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and I appreciate it. I think you have to show confidence while being a founder to get other people to believe in you and your mission as well. So that's something I've been working on. But I think especially for female founders, that's something that's a little bit harder to really perfect that skill. So I appreciate it. In terms of the motivation, I'd say all in all, I'm very focused on the mission and saving lives. And that's really meeting these transplant recipients and living donors and donors' families has pushed me to keep going on this particular mission. But to be an entrepreneur day in and day out, I think you need to celebrate the victories and surround yourself by the right people. And some days just, take a breather if things really aren't going right. Go for a walk outside and try to think about other things and come back and regroup and then start the next day as a blank slate. And I've had to do that numerous times as well.
Is your top KPI for the business like lives saved? It seems like that's what drives you as a business.
I mean, I can't think of anything better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where our focus is. But I'm curious from both of you, how do you stay motivated every day? Maybe I can learn something here.
It's a typical Johnny turnaround question.
It's a good question.
It's meeting entrepreneurs like you that keeps us motivated. Like, yeah, I mean, that's for me, seeing people like you and especially in New York, a lot of people have that ambition, which, it gives me energy to be around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's people. I think also it's like disconnecting, the last 2 weeks, it didn't work a whole lot. And just, like disconnecting and then spending that time thinking. Also a big one for me is reflecting. So I do a whole end of year, this very, very long process where I look through every single picture and every single screenshot that I took for the whole year, every event that I did on my calendar for the whole year.
Wow.
And then I make notes. It takes a long time, but I make notes on any emotion that was positive or negative that comes up when I look through all of those. And then I review those notes and I make a top 10 list of everything that happened over the year. And I make a top 10 list of photos from the year. So that at the end, like right now, we're at the beginning of January. And so that really helps. And then I apply that to the business, right? So what were the things that we did right last year? And what are the things that we want to improve or change this year? So that's very top of mind for like this time of year. And then that helps me kind of stay motivated and push to do better, hopefully.
That's incredible. A lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort. I asked my wife to do it this year and she was like, but she did. She actually did. She did the photos thing. And yeah, it is a lot of work, but it's very rewarding.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know you did that. So how many lives have you saved to date? Curious, Laura.
65.
Wow.
That's cool.
It's just incredible to be able to say that. Wow. I want to ask you kind of who's had a big, especially like you mentioned, is interesting. You mentioned nobody's a solo founder. Everybody is just like, you're connected to the people around you. That's a very like warm thought. But I'm wondering who has had maybe that biggest influence on that career, or almost like your co-founder in a way of your life?
I honestly, so my dad is an entrepreneur. He founded a logistics company that transported art between museums.
No way.
I think that really drew me into this.
You were like, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to one up him a little bit. Instead of art, do human
Parts.
body. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That's a good, like $100 million Da Vinci when it needs to be transported. I see this in Tribeca all the time. In like an art gallery, they're taking out something and there's like 20 people around it because they don't want to like scratch any part of the box or the wooden thing it's on. Like I never see anybody so carefully. Meantime, people moving up and down, scratching everything. But for these art pieces, they have enormous staff to
Are they
do
armed? Like, do they make sure nobody's is theft?
Not the ones in Tribeca. I don't think these are like that. But maybe your dad's are. Are they armed?
I would think so. He was also kind of the underlying infrastructure and didn't do the packaging. But I do know he shared a story of transporting the Declaration of Independence, and they used multiple trucks, multiple runs, and nobody was aware which was the real case with the actual Declaration of Independence in it.
That's so cool.
So I'd imagine that there's a lot more
Decoys.
precautions. Yeah.
That's whoa. That's so cool. All right. Well, so it's just, as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask, you've done business school, you've done pitch. Actually, I want to ask about pitch competition. It seems like when I was looking at your history, it seems like you win every pitch competition you participate in. How, and I've never been able to do that. Whenever I went to a pitch competition, I was like, always had such a hard time articulating the idea, especially in healthcare when a lot of the audience is like, what, like who's paying for this, like it's like too confusing, and like they want a simple like model they can understand. It's like the Uber for healthcare. Like, okay, I get it. So how do you win these competitions? What's your secret?
Sure. So my immediate feedback to that is we just say we're the Uber for organ transplants. But I think part of it's like you don't see the ones we lose. So yes, it looks very nice. All the different media outputs that we're winning all of them, but those are the ones that we choose to show across the board. And then you haven't seen all the ones where we've improved our pitch since then. So it was really just getting back out there and continuing to go to these competitions and reflect, as Taylor was saying, on what you could have done better, how it went, analyzing all of different things that you said and listening to your own voice and kind of just hating it and continuing to do these competitions until you're able to get the results that you want.
I'm curious, there's talk in New York and other places about like autonomous kind of flight or autonomous vehicles kind of, they have drones that are delivering some Walmart packages and some of them are getting shot down. But the autonomous kind of flight, like one of them's my client, that they're Archer, they're doing some like autonomous vehicles and helicopters and all this. I'm curious, do you think that would come to the organ space, or is like the human element so important that it'll probably be kind of human based with the I'm curious what you think of all that.
I think that at some point there is potential there. At this point, I think it's an awesome use case for blood and tissue and all of the other samples that they're doing with it, especially for rural communities. But when you think of organ transplant, it's predominantly transplant centers in congested cities where they're not using drones. So to do the surgery, you need to transport the surgeon back and forth. So you would need an aircraft for that. And then B, it's going into New York City, whether it's NYU or Columbia or Mount Sinai, and getting the drone to deliver the organ there. I just don't foresee it in the near future.
Does every hospital have a helipad that allows for this? Is that the way it works?
Most transplant centers do, I believe so. But there's only 250 transplant centers in the US. So not every hospital is a transplant center.
Oh, there's only 250 in the US. So you could be very, very far from one. If you were in a rural area, you could be many hours away.
Yes. So that's another difficulty with this is if you're the recipient and you're notified that you might get an organ tomorrow that you've been waiting for, you need to figure out how to get to that transplant center so you can be present for the surgery.
And you're waiting. You just wait to see. Interesting. All right. Well, as we kind of wrap here, we'll share a life hack that we all answer. Could be tech, could be an app, could be a new way of doing things. Flavio, you have a good one?
Yeah, I want to share my screen.
Sharing your screen.
Quick.
Wow.
Look at this. Have you heard of the Rally app?
No.
Rally.com. Well, so it's an app where you could buy random assets, but the one I bought shares in is a dinosaur. So you can buy like these people find like a new archaeological site where they discover some dinosaur bones. And literally they turn it into an asset that these bones are all like worth, and they package it into like a almost like a stock, like a company, and you can buy like $68 a share worth of this dinosaur that then they provide the market to sell it in the future. And I just thought it was really cool. I think they started with like NFTs and Lamborghinis and like more, crypto bro things. But now going into like dinosaurs and other assets, I just thought it was really interesting. And so
it sold out.
I own a little bit of a dinosaur.
Whoa. How do they assess
as an asset?
It said it was $14 million. How you said a value?
Yeah, well, so they look at dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's other dinosaurs that have already been dug up that are valued at a certain amount based on like museums and collectors and people who like keep these, like maybe Laura's dad would know like how this is all done. But there's a value, just like art, a painting has a value. These bones of a dinosaur have a certain value. And so my bet is that they'll trade higher in the future because there's only so many dinosaurs, right? Like there's just no way it's not gonna, increase in price. But
dude, you have to put that on your LinkedIn. You have to say co-owner of Stegosaurus. Like that's wow. Okay. All right.
What about you, Taylor?
So I have a negative life hack, which is, so I shared maybe a year ago. No, it's less than that. 6 months ago, I shared that this Scandinavian sleeping method, this idea. So the idea is that if you have two people sleeping in a bed, they each have their own sheet, like a smaller sheet, and then their own blanket. And I'm here to say, terrible, awful. Like it's awful. I'm reverting to, we're going back. Like and maybe it's just because I'm a tall person, and so the sheet is always just a little too small, and the blanket's just a little too small. So I've realized that it's destroyed my sleep. And so I'm here to say that it's not all it sounds. And I talked about how good it was at the beginning because I hadn't tried it yet. But now, 6 months in, I'm like, no, just turns out like normal sleeping is the way to go. That's the secret. The secret is just do it normally. Just be a normal person.
Just sleep.
Just sleep. Bobby, what about you?
Yeah.
Laura,
interesting. I would have thought that would work out. So.
I know intuitively. And I was pitched and it sounds really, really good. And I know people doing it. It just no.
So my go-to life hack has also been around sleep. So I'm forever indebted to my sunrise alarm clock, especially in the winter in Chicago, just having it go off and, 5 a.m., but pretend that the birds are chirping outside and that the whole room is lit up. But I think it was just yesterday, the Hatch alarm clock went down. So I always have like a secondary alarm on my phone. But I was seeing some comments on other people that they were
I have a Hatch too.
Yeah, it went down.
Well, I use it as a noise machine and clock. So like you're saying the alarm, how did it go? Like how can an alarm go out? Yeah. How can it go down?
I think since they're all like Wi-Fi enabled, there was something with the network that went down. I didn't look too far into it. People were losing it over the alarm not working for one day.
Why does it need Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I didn't realize it requires internet.
Yeah, I didn't know it required internet.
Oh, there's an app.
Of course.
Well, there is an app.
You have to control it by your phone. You don't control it.
I do. Well, you can also control it by at least mine, I can control it both over the app or via the hardware.
So it didn't wake you up? Like it didn't work?
I don't remember well enough because I have my secondary alarm regardless, but the media went nuts.
Wow. So it's called Hatch. The Restore, is that the one? The Restore 3?
Yes. It's funny. They actually started for like babies first and
Yeah,
then people like loved it. And then, so yours is like the little one. Mine's for adults. Yeah.
By the way, kids are the ultimate alarm clock. Once you have a kid, you'll never need an alarm clock again. Yeah. So it's all built in to the hardware.
Built-in wake up.
Man. Well, so nice to have you, Laura. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yes. Thank you both.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down.